right, hi everyone. Thank you for joining us today as we talk about annual planning within your network. This is Susan Leonard with the Alumni Association. I'm really excited to take this time to focus on the importance of building your calendar of events and help set you all up for a successful year. We have talked about this a lot at Leadership Georgia Tech the past few years, but we do recognize that many of you aren't able to join us on campus. So thank you for taking the time to join us in this virtual session today. It does look like we have a small group, but this will be recorded, so I encourage you to share it with your team, and we'll be sharing it out as well so that hopefully more people can take in the information. And I will open it up for questions at the end. Hopefully you can see my screen. See if it'll advance, maybe not. There we go. So here's the agenda for the day. I'll be a quick rundown of what we'll be covering in this session. First of all, we'll highlight the tools that are available in the Leaders Resource Guide, or the Toolkit. That's found online at gtalumni.org/toolkit. Please, please, please bookmark this resource and revisit it throughout your planning process so that we can, or it will come up a lot in today's webinar. So go ahead and bookmark that if you can, or if you haven't already. But then we'll cover the importance of creating the calendar and how it can ultimately help you and your team, followed then by a breakdown of how to look at the calendar as a whole, filling in the events you always host or traditionally host, the things you need to do administratively, and then seeing where you might be able to plan something new. Of course, most importantly, though, are those next steps that we'll talk about at the end. After you've watched this session and are thinking about the annual calendar, it will be critical to then meet with your team and ultimately share your calendar with us so that we can help support you in your efforts. We certainly don't want the things that you learned today or think about today to then just stop there. So here's the Leaders Resource Guide. Hopefully this isn't the first time you're seeing it or hearing of it, but we do have a really great bank of tools that you can use. Today I'll be using a few of the tools that can be found there. Again, that's gtalumni.org/toolkit. But there are more available for you to use, so check it out. Feel free to look around that toolkit and see what works for you. The first one I want to highlight is the annual calendar that shows the months that's going to be in blocks in order of our fiscal year. So that's starting July 1 and going through June 30th. And you can find a couple of options here, one that's mostly blank template and another that's filled with an example calendar. So it's got some more things filled in. For a different view, we do then have an overview checklist that might be helpful to look at as well. That's called the Annual Planning Checklist. This is a simplified version that will help you make sure that you're considering all the important aspects of that annual plan. And then later in the session, we'll cover some tips on individual event planning, which is where the event planning template will come into play. Again, these are just some templates that we've created to help you with planning, but certainly feel free to tailor them to your needs or utilize other methods for your planning. We just want you to make sure that you're planning and keep track of those plans so everyone in your team is on the same page. So the real question here is, of course, why should we create an annual calendar? Number one, of course, is planning. We all know that last-minute planning in any aspect of our lives isn't going to be as successful as if we had planned further in advance. And so we encourage and really implore you to begin planning out your calendar. If your network has never had a calendar or really an extended plan of events, then maybe your start will just be looking at 3 months ahead. But if you have a solid idea of what your upcoming year is going to look like, then putting it down on paper is really your next step and should be fairly simple if you already have those plans in your head, in the works. Now the step, though, of putting it down on paper is really going to be the critical piece in taking your network to the next level. when you have a calendar to refer to, you can see where there are gaps, both time-wise and event type-wise, so the kinds of events you're planning. And you can really begin to strategically fill those gaps then, ultimately, to reach new alumni. As opposed to relying on your standard regular events because they're just easy to plan, this will allow you to prepare for some new events that might take a bit more planning and forethought. You can also take a step back and evaluate whether or not your events are all geared towards the same group. So are they all sports related? Maybe you do a lot of happy hours. Let's try to think about what might attract an alum that's never been to one of your events before. But of course, you do want to keep in mind those quote-unquote regulars, and you want to keep them coming back as well. Another thing to note is that having plans in place will also help to give you some guidance when looking to bring in new volunteers. So you might realize that you need some help deciding on those new events to attract different types of alumni. You might then seek out a young alum for some thoughts and guidance, maybe someone specific to a geographic area that you aren't reaching right now, or find an industry professional to provide some feedback or assist in planning an event. The next time someone raises their hand to get involved, having this calendar will give you specific things you can point to. You can ask them to help specifically with sign in at your next event, maybe take photos, or help find a location for an upcoming event. It's a lot easier to both ask for and then receive positive responses for help when you have those concrete plans in place. So we certainly realize that sitting down to create an annual calendar can be a bit daunting. There's probably a reason you haven't done so already if your network doesn't have one. But I'm going to go through some tips that will hopefully make it feel a little less overwhelming to take that plunge and get started. So I think the best place to start is to take out that annual plan template from the Leaders Resource Guide. Again, that's found at gtalumni.org/toolkit, which I will continue to repeat again and again until you all can recite it from memory. You can share it with all your fellow leaders, even though hopefully, again, you've bookmarked it by now. But this particular document does already include some of the highlights of those kind of quote-unquote signature events that almost all of our networks do each year. Those might be the student send-offs, football game watchings, team buzz, welcome to the neighborhood. But it also includes some of those administrative action items like scholarship deadlines, requesting the on-the-move reports, which, as a side note, are not yet available as after we've moved to our new CRM. But you can still connect or contact us for alumni stats in your area on a quarterly basis or however often you would like those numbers. But take a look at this template. Hopefully you can see it on your screen. If not, when you get a chance to look at that at the toolkit, we'll share those links and documents as well later. But does this calendar look like a typical calendar for your network? Maybe it has a few things that don't apply to you, or maybe these are just a few of the things that you host. Maybe you do far more on a regular basis. But already we have the beginning of a really great calendar if you haven't started one yet. So here it is. We're giving it to you. You can replace that top text with the name of your network, the calendar year, and this is a tool that you can go ahead and begin using with your fellow leaders or potential volunteers just to keep you all on the same page and have kind of a guidepost of where to lead, where you're headed. So now if you want to take it to the next level on top of that, you'll start to add in some of your network-specific events. Looking now on the screen, I have the example annual plan calendar document, and this has some additional example events added on top of those signature events. First and foremost, we want you to add in those leadership meetings. Maybe you host those monthly, maybe every other month. But you really want to get that on the calendar. That's going to set you all up for success right off the bat. If you don't have a regular schedule, now's the time to consider getting one, setting that schedule so that all of your leaders know what to expect in terms of when to connect with each other next, and just keep those plans moving along. This also offers the opportunity to invite interested volunteers to your next meeting. It's really easy to do when you know that your meeting is always the first Monday of the month, for instance. You just always have that date in the back of your mind to invite somebody to come join you. Now, your network probably has a couple of regular events, such as a monthly happy hour or an annual spring speaker. So this is where you would add those events. Maybe you have additional scholarship needs to add as well. And if you have any exciting local events that you can kind of hook onto, you can add that to the calendar here as well. So hopefully you'll see that you already have a really great start, if not a full calendar at this point. It's really amazing how quickly it fills up when you sit down and fill it into these gaps in these places. But you should see probably at least one or two of things each month at this point for most of our networks. It will be clear that maybe some months are heavier or fuller than others, and some might be empty or a lot leaner. And this is certainly to be expected. We know fall is filled with football game watchings, but the December-January timeframe is usually pretty light. So that's definitely normal and to be expected. But for the most part, you should see a fairly even calendar distribution. But now is the time that you can start filling those gaps. We will talk in a minute about adding some more of those administrative action items, which will help fill it out a little bit more. But if you want to expand past what your network has traditionally done, which up to this point is what we've filled that calendar with, now's the time to look at where maybe those gaps are timing-wise or based on the types of events that you're hosting, and start to find out where you can add some new events. When looking at new events, you certainly have plenty of resources available to you to consider new ideas. Sometimes that in and of itself is a little overwhelming to think about. But the first place I would brainstorm is just with your leadership team at your next leadership meeting. Surely some people have some thoughts or can rack their brain and come up with something new and exciting. You can also reach out to your fellow network leaders. So we have that Facebook group. That's a really good opportunity. Listservs. We have our monthly calls that are a great opportunity to both share what's going well with your network, but also to ask those kinds of questions of what other people are doing, any ideas they have. And you can also, of course, reach out to us directly, and we're happy to suggest a specific network that might be a good connection to have. But find out from other networks what has been successful for them in terms of new and innovative events and see how you can work those in maybe to your network. Of course, we certainly don't want to overlook the alumni in your network. Every network is different, and alumni are looking for different things. So reaching out to your alumni can provide really valuable insight as well. We can help on that aspect in terms of sending a survey to those alumni. You might consider segmenting that out, maybe sending some different messages, one for your active alumni, those that have been out to several events or you can rely on, and ask them what they would like to see or maybe what they'd like to see more of. But then on the other side, you want to reach out to alumni that haven't been out to your events. And we can frame that as, what would it take to get you out to our events and engaging with your fellow alumni. Some other ideas may come from things that are happening in your area. Maybe there's a new bar or a restaurant maybe a brewery that's opening up in town that's gotten a lot of buzz. Bonus points, of course, if it's owned by a GT alum. But you can schedule a happy hour or a special event to check the place out while it's still hot and new. Or consider the local annual favorites. Maybe there's a holiday light display that you can enjoy as a group, or a fun 5K that you can team up to participate in. These are some really easy ways to get some new ideas out there without a lot of planning and effort on your part, but hopefully that it will attract some people that haven't been out to your events previously. So expanding beyond just those happy hour socials or networking type events. I do want to point out here on this slide as well that what we call the pillars of engagement, these are just the different categories of events that we recommend that you host. And ideally, you'll host at least one event in each of these categories each year. But these help point back to our mission and connecting alumni with events that are meaningful to them. So we have education and career support. That could include a speaker event or a fireside chat, something that is going to connect them in with alumni, kind of what's going on, some sort of educational component to it. Philanthropy, of course, is easily covered by your Team Buzz events or other volunteer opportunities that you offer, as well as your scholarship fundraisers, or however you raise funds for your scholarships or endowments and whatnot. And of course, we have a category for social engagement. That one's really easy. Pretty much the majority of our events fall into that category, but it's an important one. We want to make sure that we're connecting people socially on top of professionally and educationally. So we talked about those administrative needs. This is the last piece to the puzzle. Some of them are already on your calendar, some of the scholarship deadlines and officer reports, but make sure that you've covered all your bases. Things to think about are whether or not your team does active volunteer recruitment. When do you want new leaders to join the team? How can you fit that recruitment into elections, if any, if you have elections? How do you fit all of that into your calendar? And then, of course, if your network has its own local bank account, there are financial forms. Those are going to be due the end of the fiscal year, which is June 30th. And we'll talk about it a little bit more in a little bit, but keep in mind that all of your events are going to have their own reporting needs, both before and after the events. So those may not necessarily fall into this broad annual calendar, but it will factor into the overall planning for each event. So something to keep in mind. So now that we've got a good portion of our calendar filled out, and maybe it's entirely filled out, let's talk a little bit about planning those individual events. Now, event planning can be a whole other session in and of itself to really dive into the specifics of planning a successful event, but we will share some broad tips here. Many of your events are probably pretty low-key. These are your network socials or happy hours that just require a time and location, basically, and some marketing to spread the word. But your larger events are definitely going to need more coordination among your leadership team and other parties. So that might be your annual speaker, that stands as your scholarship fundraiser. That's going to be a really big event, and you want it to be really successful. So using tools to keep the team apprised of all of the steps for those more complicated events will be really critical. So once you've determined what kind of event you want to host, you need to just dive on in and get down to the details. I have an example template on the screen here that will help you fill in those pieces. But planning an event really does have a lot of moving pieces. So using some sort of template process sheet can help make sure that everyone is on the same page, everything is covered. And also you can take notes and make sure you have all those details on hand for next year if you're planning the same event year to year. You don't need to reinvent the wheel every year, so having kind of a one-pager with all the details is going to be really helpful. So this form, or something like it, this is the event planning template from the toolkit. This might be something that the event lead handles, the person that's kind of taking the lead of the event. But if there's not one specific person taking charge, then it could be a document that you complete during a leadership meeting. Even if there is an event lead, be sure that everyone remains in the loop so that no one person is responsible for everything. You might feel like there's only one person on your team that handles everything, but that is not at all what we expect out of a leadership team, and frankly, probably needs to be its own future webinar, but we'll talk about that later. As you're considering the event that you're looking to plan, knowing what the goal and target audience of the event will be really helpful, but also making sure that you're answering the who, what, where, when, and why of the event, just to make sure you're on the right track. You're covering, again, all your bases. Keep in mind, though, that creating this document is not the end-all, be-all of the event planning process. You'll really want to establish how you can plan on keeping up with the action items. So specifically, will there be conference calls or additional in-person meetings? Or will you do all the communicating via email? These are things to determine with your team. But ultimately, you need to decide how you are going to ensure that things are accomplished and in a timely manner. So that was really quick. Makes it feel like the event planning is really simple, but we'll move on into the marketing of your events. Once all those details are confirmed for your event, really the next most important piece is the marketing. You can plan a really great event, but if nobody knows about it, then it can't be as successful as possible. So while we handle all the mass emails on our end, we do note that our open rates are higher than industry standards, but that still only puts them at about 30%. So we do ask that you and your team really focus on how to reach those other 60% of alumni in your area. So we'll handle the mass email communications, but it's up to you to do those personal outreaches, social media pushes, and get creative for how you're reaching out to alumni, how you're marketing your events. This communication schedule template that I have on the screen, again, available in the toolkit. Hopefully you remember how to get there. This is just an example. It does look really complicated, I'm sure, but the document itself does include a how-to tab, as well as both a simple plan and a complex plan template. So it should cover all your needs. The one I have shown here on the screen is for our simple events. I know it doesn't look simple, but the complex one is a little broader. If you open it up in Excel, it's pretty easy. The date column will automatically update based on the event date that you insert elsewhere in the sheet. So it's really easy to see those due dates and keep everyone on track. You will notice that the due dates start as early as 45 days out. So that is a really important piece to notice, that even for a simple event, we want you to be looking ahead and planning as far out as possible. That 2 weeks or 3 weeks to plan a successful event just isn't enough. But now that you have your full calendar schedule, then looking ahead at these events and planning or starting the marketing 45 days out will be really easy. You already have the basics all outlined. You will also notice that this spreadsheet includes things like due dates to get us the information about your event, personal emails that you may want to send, and social media posts. But feel free to include other strategies that your team happens to use. Remembering, of course, with social media specifically, that the content sharing really relies on algorithms. And so the most important piece to take away from this sheet, as you'll notice, is that you're sending multiple pushes leading up to the event, that you can't just post it a month out and then expect people to see that and remember the event and plan on attending the event. So be sure you're posting several times leading up to the event. And for an added bonus, see if you can post pictures live during the event. That's another way to keep the engagement going. This will set the tone for your future events. So people that weren't able to make it, they'll still see that people were having a good time, it was a good turnout, and they'll be more likely to come out to your future events. And then post a follow-up after the event, thanking everyone for being there. That's a good way to keep the engagement going with people that were able to attend. They'll feel some pride and some connection as they see that in their social media feed. There are, of course, other tools for managing projects. I'm sure you are familiar with some in your professional lives. Managing tools that allow you to assign people to tasks and set up automatic reminders so that nothing is overlooked, and again, everybody's on the same page. Things like Trello or Asana are pretty common, but you might have a tool that you work with frequently at your job that you can tailor and implement here, and that's perfectly acceptable as well. We just want you to make sure that you have some way of looking ahead and making sure that things are moving along. So speaking of moving along, next steps. That was a lot of information to cover. I know we just kind of breezed through it, but I hope that it's helped you begin thinking about your network's overall plan, what it can look like. But I do imagine and expect that it's maybe created some more questions on your end. So please do remember that we are always here to help support you in your event planning, whether that's brainstorming new ideas or helping think through the event logistics. Please do let us know how we can help you. We are here to support you, and we want you all to be successful. We are happy to hop on a conference call with you and your team to dive deeper into the event planning process. If you need to, just let us know. We can't do it unless you tell us that that's what you need. So after today's webinar, and maybe after sharing the recording with the rest of your team, your next step is really going to be to schedule some time to sit down with your team, your fellow leaders, hopefully in person. That's going to be the best, easiest way to all get on the same page. But begin fleshing out that main calendar template and then determine what your next step as a team is going to be. So those are the key things. Start to look at your calendar template and then determine your next steps. You might just put down on paper everything that you've done historically and then call that a meeting and decide that you'll meet again at a certain day and time to brainstorm new ideas or ways to fill in those gaps. Or you might be able to sit down in that one session and create a full calendar and determine who's responsible for each event and action item. And then you'll determine how you're going to continue following up, likely at your regular leadership meetings that are already on the calendar. Yay, that's so easy. So those are your next steps. Talk with your leadership team, start to fill out your calendar, and decide as a team how you're going to keep on top of things, how you're going to keep the ball rolling and continue with those plans. Ultimately, once you finalize that calendar, we ask that you send it our way. That will help us better support you. We can provide timely reminders and updates if we know what you have coming. We can help plug in other support pieces and things as needed. But we'd also love to be able to share your plans with other networks if that would be okay with you, and that would help other networks maybe that are just up and coming or getting reinitiated. Every example and tool is really helpful for new and ongoing groups. So please share that with us. Ultimately, that's really going to help us help you. So that would be really appreciated on our end. So I've just talked for a long time. I want to open it up now for questions. If that spurred anything from you, feel free to unmute yourself, and if you'll just share your name and network, and feel free to open up for questions.
Hi, Susan. This is Marilyn from Triangle. Is there a planned date for the Welcome to the Neighborhood for this fall yet?
That is a really good question. We need to work with, that's usually an event that is spearheaded by our Young Alumni Council. And I have not heard anything from them yet, but we can absolutely reach out, and I will see if they've talked about it yet. Traditionally, it is in the fall, but I know some networks either have done an additional one in the late spring, early summer time range, right after students graduate, or have asked or have thought about that, and that's certainly something we can look into as well. But I will make a note to ask about any current plans for a Welcome to the Neighborhood. Good question.
Thank you.
Hey, Susan, it's Fred. How are you?
Hey, Fred. How are you doing today?
Oh, doing pretty good. Thank you so much for holding this session. It's very educational. Can you elaborate more on how we might better, like, once we start using these templates more regularly, how we might share them with you most efficiently? I take it they're not anything that's like a Google Doc or anything that's like stored on the cloud where we can update it and you can continuously see it, right? Mm-hmm. Like, do we keep sending it to you, or what do you suggest?
That's a great question. I will be completely honest in that we've had so few groups share this kind of content with us in the past that you're right. We don't have a solid plan in place as of now. We would just like the information however you have it. The documents as they are in the toolkit or the Leaders Resource Guide, those are either in PDFs or Excel documents. Just those are the easiest ways for us to share them in that place. But I'm happy to explore some options through some of those kind of collaborative spaces where that might be more helpful for your team. You could use one document and continue to update it, and then also just include us there. So if you have that in place already for your network, you can go ahead and share it with us however works best for you. But if you're looking for an option to create that collaborative environment, reach out to me and I'll be happy to set you up with something.
Thank you. I'd love that. And can you tell me, how long have these templates as they are right now been in place and available? Is this something really old that's been in the toolkit, or is this something that's just been done in the last couple of years?
This is within the last couple of years. So I think these have come across or come about in the last couple Leadership Georgia Techs. So a lot of it is were uploaded after LGT as examples of sessions that we did there. And I think some of them may have even come directly from a network, and that's what they use.
Well, I'm sorry that we haven't utilized them, more. One suggestion might be, just since it's so hard to get everybody onto these calls, would maybe be to post some screenshots of them. You probably already did it during Leadership GT, but maybe on the network leaders page and say, hey, click on the Leaders Toolkit link to go to this great planning template, that other networks use. Because you've seen some of our templates that we use, but this is just as good as any. So I'd love to use something that is very familiar to you, so that it just helps us work together smoothly.
Sure. Yeah, we appreciate that. And that brings up kind of the unending questions that we have in terms of how best to share information with everyone. Not everybody's in our Facebook group, and not everybody reads emails, and not everybody joins our calls. And so we're always trying to figure out the more ways to get information in front of as many people as possible. So we will continue that, but if anybody has specific ideas, we are happy to hear those in terms of just information sharing. There's a lot of information out there, and we know that you all are busy and can't always keep up with everything we have. So that is something we are continually trying to learn and improve. But thank you, Fred. And actually, that also reminds me, I know I saw your recent meeting notes, the minutes from your last leadership meeting, and I'm probably going to reach out and see if I can steal that template from you, because that looked great.
Oh, please do. Yeah, it's very helpful for us. And then I can also send you our agenda template is a lot more simplified, but it kind of, the two dovetail and, go into each other each month.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was perfect. I was in the process of creating some documents like that, and I saw that, and I just haven't had a chance to reach out and ask you more, but thanks for being on the call and bringing that back to the front of my mind.
And, maybe one other thing, and I know I don't want to, like, we can discuss offline since this is recorded and people will be watching it, but one idea that I, this whole recent stuff with our network and going on, we've been utilizing that Basecamp tool that's kind of like Trello and all those others, and just in the last month or so with the new communications chair. And I really liked having a tool like that, and I wonder if there's one of those that the Alumni Association could use universally and create separate subgroups or something for each network, to where you have access to it, and networks, it's kind of the gold standard that you can train people on, and it's not like they have to use it, but at least it's one standard that across the board everybody's using, and maybe the Alumni Association is footing the bill. I know ours, you could only do like 3 projects at a time for the free one, but you could pay more to have multiple. But I have a feeling that it wouldn't be that much to have it for the whole association. Just an idea.
Mm-hmm. No, great idea. I love it. I personally use the Trello a lot, but I know there's a lot of different things out there. So, yeah, that's certainly a good idea. We can look into seeing if there's something that would help across the board.
Yeah, I'm really liking those project management tools. I just wish that it's hard. A lot of our alumni, like volunteers, just that's kind of overwhelming to have to deal with and see in their inbox. But, for folks that are planning these events and the calendar, like you're discussing, it's just, it really does help.
Yes, it does, for sure. Thank you. Some good questions and some good things for us to think about. Were there any other questions, or did that spur any other thoughts from anyone on the call? All right. Well, thank you again for joining us today. We are certainly looking forward to seeing all those calendars. But please, if you take nothing else out of this session, please know that we are here to support you through this planning process. So, if you forget where the toolkit is, again, gtalumni.org/toolkit, just send us an email. I'm happy to point you to those links or provide the documents directly. We certainly don't want anything to get in the way of you all planning with your networks, but we are here for you. So let us know how we can support you. I think that is going to conclude, if there aren't any other questions, the session for today. This will be, like I said, recorded, and we'll share that out. But if you all and your teams can make sure that everyone at least has access to this, that will help you all get on the same page so you can move forward with your planning. And let us know what you need from us to get those calendars in place. But thanks, everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you very much. You too.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.